Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Archana Solanki and here are the headlines we're tracking this hour. Sensex and Nifty end with marginal gains. Nifty Bank ends flat after some wild swings. Mid-caps underperform. The Supreme Court takes away banks' power to declare accounts as fraudulent unilaterally. The Apex Court rules that banks will have to give a hearing to the borrowers and provide reasons before declaring an account as a fraud. Sun Pharma tells exchanges that a cybersecurity attack by a ransomware group resulted in the breach of certain file systems and theft of certain company and personal data. The company says it's expected to lose some revenue due to the attack, adds that it will incur the expenses for remediation. Indian skincare brand Mamaearth's co-founder Varun Alagh tells CNBC-TV18 that reports of the company withdrawing its IPO are baseless, says that the DRHP should be approved by next month. Iconic houseware brand Cello World is looking at raising 2,000 crores via an IPO. Opposition lawmakers from 17 political parties protest against the disqualification of Rahul Gandhi as Member of Parliament. TMC MPs joined the protest, calls it special mark of solidarity. Rajya Sabha passes the finance bill amidst uproar from the opposition benches over the Adani issue. Israel's government plunges into chaos. Mass protests over judicial reforms intensify after Prime Minister Netanyahu sacked his defense minister for opposing the overhaul. Flights grounded at Tel Aviv airport and the country's largest trade union launches a general strike. Former RBI Governor Reddy is happy with the way RBI has cleaned up banks, but he is not happy that over 90% of the bad loans are getting written off. On the current banking crisis, Reddy says the ideal banking system would be one where 30% comprises public sector banks. All right, straight to the day's market action. Market failed to hold recovery after mid-caps underperformed benchmark indices. Nifty and Sensex ended 0.25% higher, while the Nifty Bank ended flat. The mid-cap index ended with cuts of 0.5%. The market capitalization of BSE companies slipped to its lowest level since July 15, 2022. Prashant Nair is here with the details. Prashant, over to you.
Well, a disappointing day for bulls, those who were hoping that the market will finally break out. It did give us the signs. Mid-afternoon, even late into the session, the Nifty was up 130, 140 points. But in the last 45 minutes or so, things just completely went south. The Nifty ended absolutely flat, 20-odd point gain. Banks actually sold off. The Bank Nifty was in the red by close. And it was not as if there was any great global volatility in the last 45 minutes of our trade. So this is just sort of falling on its own weight. Nifty, the gainers first. Reliance was a big contributor. Infosys, Kotak Bank, Grasim and State Bank of India. More banks. Actually, large cap financials doing quite okay. Cuts coming through on names like Adani Ports, SBI Life and Power Grid, which were the top losers. Market breadth never recovered. Even when the Nifty was up and up, market breadth was deeply in the red, and that was the way we closed off at 330. IEX, Wockhardt, Aarti Drugs, Hikal, Surya Roshni, Bombay Dyeing are some of the names which fell on volumes. But there were gainers as well, even though, as I said, breadth was firmly negative. HAL, the defense name, Lupin, Biocon, Glenmark. Pharma actually had a pretty decent day. Naukri, that is InfoEdge, and Uno Minda were some of the stocks which did quite well. The question is, now that the market today once again has given up from the day's high and sold off, will it eventually retest the 16,850, 16,800 kind of levels? We got two tests of those levels, but successfully that was defended. And of course, global headlines become important again. US seemed settled as we came back into this new week. European worries continue, although price action in Europe today was also quite okay. Will banking worries globally take a bit of a backseat, which should allow us some relief rallies? Back to you.
Right. Thank you, Prashant, for that. Moving on, let's take an update in the currency market. The rupee ended the day at 82.39 against the greenback. A weak dollar and a positive trend in domestic equities helped the rupee gain some ground. In the commodity market, oil prices have stabilized and gained some lost ground after investors assess efforts by authorities to rein in concerns over the global banking crisis. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that he planned to place tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, which increased geopolitical tensions in Europe. Moving on, the failure of Silicon Valley Bank earlier this month triggered fears about the stability of other lenders, sparking sharp falls in bank shares around the world. Now, the assets and loans of SVB are being bought by its rival, First Citizens Bank. Under the SVB takeover deal, all 17 former SVB branches will open under the First Citizens brand. It has bought around $72 billion of SVB's assets and loans at a discount of $16.5 billion. The FDIC will still hold about $90 billion of SVB's assets. Separately, the chairman of the Saudi National Bank, Ammar al-Khudairi, has resigned. This comes within days of his comments that SNB was unlikely to increase its stake in Credit Suisse. This at a time when the European lender battled a crisis of investor confidence that plunged its shares. He will be replaced by SNB's MD and Group CEO Mohammed Al-Ghamdi. The bank in a statement said that Al-Khudairi was stepping down due to personal reasons. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund's chief warned that risks to financial stability have increased and called for continued vigilance. This even as actions by advanced economies have calmed market stress. Officials at the U.S. Federal Reserve are expected to face lawmakers this week after a slew of bank failures. CNBC's Steve Fleisman has... All right, moving on back home, the Finance Ministry has issued an advisory for public sector banks on the back of prevailing global financial stress. The government has emphasized on a closer look at business models to identify stress points, among others. The Finance Ministry has asked PSU banks to frame detailed crisis management strategies as well. Sapna Das gets us more.
Well, it's a very detailed advisory worked out between the government and the public sector banks. Starting off first with the issues raised on deposits. Well, the government wants the public sector banks to have more stickiness in terms of the deposits. They should not be moving in quickly in and out. The nature of the deposits should be more granular. Maybe they should rely less on bulk and corporate deposits and focus, on other high-quality current account and savings account. That is one big message. Second, of course, in terms of the exposure to government securities, they should follow the SLR benchmark that has been set out by RBI in terms of their GSEC exposure. Also, in terms of managing their asset liability mismatches better. All kinds of pledged shares should be, kind of included while calculating corporate exposures. These pledged shares should also be regularly provided for. Banks should also have a ready playbook in terms of responding to any kind of a crisis situation. And last but not the least, to increase the interest rate transmission and also to avoid pricing risks. Risk-based lending should be adopted. Discretionary lending should be avoided. And, the external benchmark linked lending rate should be adopted so that the interest rate transmission is more effective. The interesting part is that all this communication has gone to the public sector banks so far. There has been no communication from the government to the private sector banks. Maybe that is something that the government can think about.
All right, thank you, Sapna, for that. Moving on. I'm happy with the way RBI has cleaned up banks, but not happy that over 90% of the bad loans are getting written off. That's the word coming in from former RBI Governor Y.V. Reddy. Speaking to Lata Venkatesh, Reddy said no other country has bankruptcy process seeing such low 5% realization of value. He further said his ideal banking system would be where 30% of the system comprises of public sector banks. Take a look.
I'm quite happy with the cleaning up of the RBI banks that Das and his company have done, Raghuram Rajan and Das, etc. I think I'm quite comfortable with the overall framework. See, I don't think in other countries the bankruptcy process results in realization of 5% of the value. Nah? I don't know the statistics, have been out of touch. But if I were in the Reserve Bank, the first thing I will do is I'll collect information about the realization in all countries, or at least important countries, find out what is the realization and why. Are we below or are we above? That will give me a comfort in regard to the working of the legislation. Otherwise not. And how quickly we do that. How quickly and how much.
Moving on, the Supreme Court has taken away banks' power to unilaterally declare accounts as fraudulent. The Apex Court today, while upholding a Telangana High Court order of 2020, held that banks will have to give a hearing to the borrowers before declaring them to be fraud. Ashwit Kumar, who's been tracking the case, gets us more details.
A hugely significant order for the banking sector that affects the rights of borrowers as well as the concerns of lenders against default. So what is this Supreme Court judgment? What does it mean for the stakeholders? Well, at the heart of the issue is a 2016 circular issued by the RBI that armed banks to unilaterally declare accounts of willful defaulters as fraud. The Supreme Court has taken away that unilateral power, noting that it poses risks of arbitrary orders. So what exactly has the Supreme Court held? Well, in short, the Supreme Court has upheld the Telangana High Court judgment. The Supreme Court held that borrowers must be issued a notice and should be allowed a hearing before being declared as fraud. The Supreme Court holds that banks can't be allowed to exercise this power arbitrarily. The Supreme Court declared that principles of natural justice require that the affected party is given, at the very least, a hearing. But speaking of reasons, what are the Supreme Court's reasons behind stripping banks of this unilateral power? Well, the Supreme Court held that declaration of fraud by the bank has serious consequences, both penal as well as civil. Penal because the bank is required to file an FIR post-declaration of an account as fraud, and civil consequences because the declaration of fraud works like a blacklisting mechanism that bars the borrowers from accessing credit facilities. The Supreme Court has also made an addition to RBI's 2016 circular. The Supreme Court has now directed that banks will be required to record in their orders the reasons for declaring a particular borrower as fraudulent. The Supreme Court has hoped that this recording of reasons in the order will ensure that the banks don't exercise this power arbitrarily. Now, this should come as a setback to the RBI as well as to the banking system. The central bank had argued at length that this internal mechanism was required to act as an early warning system to alert other banks to risks posed by certain defaulters.
Right, thank you, Ashmit, for that. Moving on, Sun Pharma has informed stock exchanges that a cybersecurity attack by a ransomware group resulted in the breach of certain file systems and theft of certain company and personal data. The company said it's expected to lose some revenue due to the attack. Ekta Batra joins us now. Ekta, tell us more about this attack on Sun Pharma.
Further to their intimation earlier this month, Sun Pharma has informed the exchanges that the recent IT security incident that took place at Sun Pharma's premises was caused by a ransomware group that has claimed responsibility for the attack. The attack resulted in breach of certain file systems and theft of certain company and personal data. The attack, the company has said, impacted their business operations and is expected to reduce revenue in some of their businesses. Sun will also incur expenses for remediation efforts. While Sun has not named the ransomware group that is responsible for the IT attack, multiple unverified reports have named Black Cat, also known as ALPHV, as the group involved in the breach. The ransomware group started operations in November of 2021 and is known to target healthcare and public health sector, as per a US government report. There are also many unanswered questions, such as what type and amount of data was stolen, how the issue was resolved with the ransomware group, whether it was resolved permanently, and whether there was a police complaint filed or not. We reached out to Sun Pharma. They do not have a comment on the same. The street, however, is not worried about the incident affecting the company's ability to achieve their targets for FY23, which they have guided for as high single-digit to low double-digit growth. However, one needs to watch for further updates from the company, as they have indicated they are currently unable to determine potential adverse impacts of the incident, such as increased costs for protection against further security incidents or possibility of litigation.
All right, thank you, Ekta, for that. Moving on, speaking of cyber attacks, Twitter said part of its source code were leaked online. Various excerpts of the company's algorithms were posted by a user named Free Speech Enthusiast on GitHub, a Microsoft-owned platform. GitHub complied with Twitter's pleas and disabled the content. Twitter has also asked the U.S. District Court of Northern California to identify the alleged infringer who posted the company's source code. All right, it's time for a short break. When we return, we'll get you the latest from Israel, where mass protests are taking place across the country over judicial reforms. This after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sacked his defense minister. Stay tuned, we'll be back. Welcome back. The big national story. The Rajya Sabha passed and returned the finance bill to Lok Sabha amid sloganeering from the opposition parties over the Adani issue and the disqualification of Rahul Gandhi as a member of parliament. Congress MPs appeared in black in parliament while 16 other parties, including Trinamool Congress, also joined the protest. Party President Mallikarjun Kharge and Priyanka Gandhi Vadra have accused the BJP of trying to silence a martyr's son. OBC MPs of BJP also held protests demanding an apology from Rahul Gandhi over his Modi surname remark.
आज हम काले कपड़े के ड्रेस में क्यों आए कि ये नहीं कि किसी को बताने के लिए नहीं, हम ये दिखाना चाहते हैं कि इस देश में डेमोक्रेसी को मोदी जी एक एक करके खत्म कर रहे हैं।
कोई ये कहे कि हसन भ्रष्ट है तो पूरी हसन कम्युनिटी हो गई क्या बदनाम? मोदी जिनका नाम था उनको क्या? ये तो एक फेस सेविंग वाली बातें हैं ना। ओबीसी को भी मालूम है, वो भी यही कह रहे हैं कि गलत हो रहा है। राहुल गांधी ने किसी का अपमान नहीं करा। और जहाँ तक सवाल इस बात का है कि उनको सैक कर दिया गया, वो मैंने आपको बता ही दिया कि इतनी जल्दबाजी में नहीं होना चाहिए।
अहंकार इतना ज्यादा राहुल गांधी जी का है कि वो पिछड़े समाज से माफी तो नहीं मांगी, कोर्ट में भी माफी नहीं मांगी, कोर्ट का जब आदेश आ गया तो उसको भी मानने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। जिस समय आदेश आया उसी समय से उनकी मेंबरशिप चले गई, सदस्यता चले गई। अब ये नौटंकी किसके लिए है?
All right, shifting tracks now. Latest on India's COVID situation. India has reported over 1,800 new COVID cases for the second consecutive day, taking the active cases tally to over 10,000. This is the highest spike in daily cases in the last 5 months. Amid rising cases, Health Secretary Rajesh Bhushan is holding a virtual review meeting with state health secretaries to assess COVID preparedness. Moving on, and with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business 360. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to CNBC TV18. The news continues on the other side.